Stavím vás, přátelé.
Well, it's a great pleasure and honor to welcome Mr. William Friedkin, not only in Czech Republic, in Karlovy Vary, but at this wonderful masterclass. It is a moving moment for all of us, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Carl. It's my pleasure to be here, and I want to thank you personally for inviting me and for running my film Sorcerer. I'm very grateful to you.
Thank you. I'm sure I don't have to introduce Mr. Friedkin, an amazing American director, the filmmaker or the director of films such as The French Connection, The Exorcist, Cruising, To Live and Die in L.A., Buck, Killer Joe. But first and most of the film Sorcerer, of which the restored version we were happy to screen a few days ago with the amazing introduction of Mr. Friedkin, where he was mentioning his love for Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic, and Czech cinema. Could you, for those who didn't have a chance to attend the screening, could you reassume what you talked about before the screening, please?
I'll try. Do they understand my English?
Sure.
My influences and those of my generation were largely European cinema.
Oh, they do
You understand?
I'm sure. Is there anybody who
Okay.
doesn't understand English? Because
Okay.
if we translate, it'll significantly slow down the flow of the
I do want
talk.
you to understand, though. And then I loved the films of Fellini, Antonioni, Alain Resnais, so many other European filmmakers. In 1967, I remember seeing a Czech film called Closely Watched Trains, Jiří Menzel. And I thought this was a very powerful experience. It was beyond simply entertaining or fantastic cinema. It was very inspirational. And 1 year later came what is called the Prague Uprising, and we were conscious, my generation, of how the people of Czechoslovakia then were fighting against an oppressive government. And this inspired those of my age to rise up against the Vietnam War and against the oppressive reactions of our own government. I believe that both Closely Watched Trains and the Prague Uprising, even though it was very short, less than a year, is directly responsible for the uprising in America against Vietnam and against the Nixon administration. And so, yeah, and then, of course, I've seen many other Czech films, especially we all understood the satire of Miloš Forman in Black Peter and the Fireman's Ball. We all understood that this was a satire on a stupid bureaucracy. And this inspired us to try to make films in our own way that did the same thing.
Thank you. I found one of the most exciting questions we can ask a filmmaker is, in case you'd have a chance to have 3 carte blanches to program 3 movies that influenced you the most in your life and gave you the most of the inspiration, which 3 films would you pick?
I would, just off the top of my head, I would say Citizen Kane by Orson Welles, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre by John Huston, and probably a movie you might not expect, a film called All About Eve by Joseph L. Mankiewicz, which is a woman's story, but which I think is about the best American screenplay ever written. It's magnificent, but there are many others.
For instance, from foreign cinema? I know you're
From
a big
foreign-
lover of French films from 50s and 60s and Italian ones?
Well, from European cinema and from the East, Kurosawa, Rashomon, of course. From Italy, Fellini's 8.5 and La Dolce Vita. From Alain Resnais in France, Hiroshima Mon Amour last year at Marienbad. I put in that category Jerry Menzel and Closely Watched Trains, and I have a personal collection, which I watch all the time, of the animated films of Jan Schwankmajer, including Faust, which is an incredible work, a truly great work of art. Not as appreciated as it should be because it's, claymation, and it was an unusual form for people. But I, to this day, watch the films of Jan Schwankmajer gratefully because of DVD, which is how they've preserved the masterpieces of Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. When I made my films, and long before me, when Billy Wilder made his films, and when Chaplin and Buster Keaton made these masterpieces, they thought it was all over. They would never be seen again. There was no shelf life, as we say, until home video. And now you can see everything. And this is very important for young people who love cinema. They can see everything. I couldn't. It was very difficult to see. I'm from Chicago, and it was very difficult to see the films of Milos Forman and Jerry Menzel. You had to go to some far-out place to see these films. But now they can be seen in many places, including in our homes.
Thank you. I wanted to use this opportunity to those who didn't know about this wonderful book called The Friedkin Connection, which is a memoir by Mr. William Friedkin, which I strongly recommend as an amazing and very entertaining source of inspiration and knowledge about the life and work of Mr. Friedkin. How long did it take you to write the book?
3 years. But let me tell them, this picture, this is not me. This is Tom Cruise. He just looks like me.
There's a beautiful, the whole book is amazing, but the prologue is particularly amazing.
I know,
Could you please, I don't want to say it with my words because I'm sure you should say it, but could you please talk about things you missed on in life?
I speak about all of the mistakes I made and the opportunities that I lost. For one thing, I don't know how many of you are familiar with an artist called Jean-Marie Basquiat. And Basquiat, when he was a very young man, one day I received an envelope in my office at Warner Brothers. And I opened the envelope and there were about 20 beautiful watercolors. I didn't think they were that beautiful at the time. They just looked like graffiti to me. And I looked through them and I thought, these are nice. I threw them away. They would today be worth about $20 million. But I didn't understand them, I admit. And then there was a record artist named Prince who sent me a demo recording of a song he wrote called Little Red Corvette. And I played it. He had asked me if I would do a video of this song. And I played the record. No, thank you. Out. And then I was offered a 1/3 ownership of the basketball team, the Boston Celtics, for very little money. Very little money. And I decided not to do it because at that time the team was losing money. This was in 1978. They were losing money. And I thought, well, I love basketball, but I'm not going to gamble. And then I was offered the opportunity to own 1/3 of a young fighter who was just coming up. He was being trained by a great fight trainer named Cus D'Amato. And he told me about this young man, 15 years old, who was going to be a heavyweight champion. And I said, Cus, it'll be years before you're a great trainer, but who is this guy? His name was Mike Tyson. And so I passed on ownership of him. And then a number of years later, Francis Coppola, my friend and partner at the time, came to me with a script. And he said, here, we can produce this script. Our company can produce this. I read the script. This is awful. What is this? I said, are you going to direct this? And he said, no, but we can produce it. It was called Star Wars. I said, you're not going to direct it? He said, no, George is. George was his assistant, George Lucas. I said, he can't direct this. George Lucas cannot direct this. I don't want to invest in it. So if I had invested in it, I would own this hotel today. So there are many opportunities like that I begin my book explaining what a fool I actually was.
Are you rewatching your films?
No. I see them, when you make a film, you see them thousands of times. When you're shooting it, when you do more than one take, when you supervise the printing of the film, you look at many, many prints and reject them. And then again, when you're editing the film, you see it again and again and again. When you're doing the sound mix, you see it hundreds of times. So by the time the film comes out, it has no mystery for me anymore. So I can't. The only film I can watch with any sort of enjoyment is Sorcerer.
Which you must have rewatched a number of times during the restoration process, no?
Exactly. But I can still watch that. I still am fascinated by the characters and the story. But that's it. I can't watch The Exorcist now, or The French Connection, or any of the others. I know them. I mean, they hold no surprise for me anymore.
When and how did you find out about the effort to restore Sorcerer?
Warner Brothers had always wanted to re-release Sorcerer, and so they came to me and said they would like to buy the rights. And we couldn't figure out who owned the rights because it was made by two studios, Universal and Paramount. And Universal had only a 25-year license that had expired. And so Warner Brothers asked if I would approve if they went to Paramount and bought the American rights for redistribution in theaters, which it now is, plus home video and streaming. You know what streaming is. And Warner's bought those rights, and Paramount retained all of the worldwide rights for the rest of the world. So the print that played here the other night was courtesy of Paramount.
The print.
The DCP, the digital.
Very, very interesting subject.
That's what we call them.
Yes.
Digital prints.
No, I mean digital and future of the cinema. How do you see it?
Look,
what's your opinion on that?
A lot of people don't like what I say about this. There are a lot of purists, guys who think 35 millimeter is the only true and pure form of cinema. I find this to be ridiculous. It's bullshit, as we say. 35 millimeter was a long road to a more perfect system. It's like asking people who used to ride around in a horse and carriage, and they would say, oh, I prefer the horse and carriage to a car. Who wants to drive a motor car? It's stupid. It's not going to work, you know. And the only pure form of transportation is with a horse and carriage or on a horseback. And these are people who are nostalgic for horseshoes and carriage wheels, and I am not. 35 millimeter prints start to fade the moment they're created. They lose their colors eventually. They get there's dirt all over them. There's scratches. The film breaks in the projector, and there's splices all over the film. The soundtrack gets dirty, and it has a sound over it. You don't have this with digital. The digital image is pure. That's one thing. The digital image is what you see through the lens of the camera. That's what is pure. If you light the shot like it's like film lighting, dramatic lighting, it will look just as good, if not better, than if it's lit for 35 millimeter. But then the purists say, well, it's the grain. It has nothing to do with grain. It has to do with the purity of the image. You get what you see. Now, the other important thing about the digital process is that young people who are interested in becoming filmmakers, they can do what I could never do when I grew up and wanted to make films. Young people can go out and buy a small digital camera, and they can shoot what they see. They can buy a camera for very little money, comparatively, shoot the film that they want, take it home, edit it on their own computer, and when they finish, they can put a score to it, a soundtrack. Then they can take it and put it on one of the social networks like YouTube, or there are many others now. I could never have done that. In my day, you had to take an entry-level job, a very small job for a studio or a television station. And by the way, women could not do that in those days. Women could not get those jobs that young men, young boys got. Entry-level jobs, and you might never be able to make a film, ever. You might one day get to work on a film, maybe, if you're lucky. Today, every young person who wants to make cinema can go out and buy the material to make it. And this is a great advance, Carol.
Have you ever considered to do the same? To just use a small camera and do maybe a different kind of film?
Yes, I do that.
Just for the pleasure of...
I do that, absolutely. And it is like a new medium. To me, it's like a new medium. And I love it. And the image, again, is what you see. When you made a print of a 35 millimeter picture, it was, no print was perfect. Not one reel of a print was perfect, because the developer that you ran the negative through was different at all times because of the different composition of the water in the developer. The amoeba, the little insects in the water, were constantly changing. And then the electricity to the printer was constantly fluctuating. You couldn't see it, but it was fluctuating, as most electricity does. It's often imperceptible, but electricity fluctuates and varies. And so between the developer and the electricity, all of the reels were different. One reel would come off the printer bluish, another greenish. And I remember rejecting hundreds of reels to get one, because I supervised the printing of my films. And I worked very closely with 35 millimeter. And we always thought of it as a compromise. It was always a compromise. And you wouldn't know what you got until a day or two later, when the film would come back, the rushes would come back from the lab. And you'd say, oh my God, it's overexposed, or it's underexposed, or it's torn, there's scratches in it. With digital, you see it immediately. When you make the shot, you look at what's being made, you play it back, that's it. You don't have to do other takes. We used to say, let's do another take for safety. For safety. What that meant was you were wasting time and money in case the first take got ruined in the lab. Now we don't do that. There's no more safety. You know, that's it. You just shot this, the lighting is this, or whatever. It's done. You move on. So for all of these reasons, I prefer the digital world.
What part of the filmmaking do you enjoy the most?
Editing.
Is it?
Yeah, I enjoy the editing most. A film is made 3 times, at least 3 times. One version is in the script. That's one version of the film. The next version is when you go out to shoot that script, to photograph it with actors. And the actors make changes, or or you make changes. You see something happening, something interesting, and that you didn't plan, but you keep it. And it changes sometimes the story. And certainly it changes sequences. And then it's made again in the editing room, a whole other film where things occur to you. For example, in The French Connection, which ends very ambiguously, I found that ending in the editing room. That wasn't in the script. I found an ending that did not explain a damn thing, because I didn't invite the audience to see this film as a history lesson or as a documentary. And I changed the film in the editing room. I actually had photographed 9 more scenes for that film that I cut out because they didn't help the story. You know, it was like scaffolding on a building that you use to create the architecture of the building. And when the building is finished, you remove the scaffolding. And the 9 scenes that I had shot were just scaffolding, and I took them, I realized that only in the cutting room. Same with The Exorcist. I had cut 12 minutes out, which I later put back some 25 years later. Because to me, this film is no different than clay, which is why I like claymation films, especially those by Janusz Schwankmajer. Film is like clay. You can change it. You can change its shape, its form, which changes its substance. So I make a film at least 3 times.
Television. You spent quite a huge amount of time in the beginning of your career working for television.
Yeah, live television.
Live television, obviously. Nowadays, there's a lot of discussions about television and cinema and the relationship and the filmmakers working more and more on TV. What's your opinion about that?
I think a lot of cable television in America is better now than cinema. It's more complex, it's deeper, it's for adults. There's a lot of cable television in America that assumes that you, the audience, are intelligent. They don't assume that you're a child who just want to watch video games and comic books on a screen. And in cinema, that is the assumption. You just want to see guys flying around with a spandex suit and a cape and a mask, solving crime everywhere. This is 80%, I think, of American cinema. And it's popular all over the world, not just in America. People watch this stuff. To me, much of it is like opium for the eyes. You watch like this. It doesn't go into your brain. You don't think about it later. But perhaps younger people do. But the cable television programs in America is what people talk about the next day and the next week and on for many weeks. So film is a constantly changing media. Not only the forms of delivery like digital now, but the kind of films that are made. They're more interesting, the films, to me, for cable television. Do you see any of them here? Homeland, you see here? And 24 and The Sopranos. There is no cinema in America anymore that is as complex as works like that, like True Detective. That is a much more serious medium in America today.
I know there are several people in the audience who would like to ask a question. Mr.
Where are
Friedkin.
they? Who are they? Questions? I've answered all the questions. My films answered all of the questions. Okay, you want to call on them?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
My name is Maciej Minat. I have two questions.
Go ahead, while I tighten my belt.
Why? Because I'm a great fan of you and of Federico Fellini. And why is this connection? Why is this? Why you are so interested? Because it is European filmmaker, and then I will have another question.
You promise?
Yes.
Okay. Well, there's one difference between Federico Fellini and me. Federico Fellini is a master, and he makes masterpieces, and I simply work in cinema. This is the truth. I could make up some lies and tell you that Fellini and I, nothing, no. Fellini's works are for the ages. They will live forever, like the paintings of Vermeer and Rembrandt and Titian, and Veronese, so many you can name, the Impressionists. But Fellini belongs in that category. He made masterpieces, not all, but many. And that's why I love them. I'm influenced by them. I couldn't make films like that, or by Alain Resnais, or Antonioni. These filmmakers might even not be known to a lot of this generation, but they were known to my generation, and they are masterpieces. I look at a painting by Vermeer, like The View of Delft, which I've seen many times now. It's in the Mauritius Museum in the Netherlands. It's an absolute masterpiece. You stand in front of it, and you are back in the 17th century on a little dock watching the ordinary lives of people who are shopping and talking to each other. And You are in that world and in that other life. And that's what happens to me when I see a film like 8½. You know, it is another world and another life that you are privileged to enter for 2 hours. Okay?
Oh, that's a beautiful answer, but I still think that you made masterpieces.
Well, you're very. I have to give you that, you know, that 100 crowns I promise.
But
I drink to you. Should I give a toast? No? Okay. Cheers.
Thank you. But such a successful director as you are, but is there a project is there a project you put great energy into it, money, everything, and despite of it, it remained unfinished?
No. No. When The Sorcerer came out, first in 1977, it was unsuccessful. That's 37 years ago. And now it's playing all over the world. Everywhere. Just played in Istanbul. It plays everywhere now. It played in Venice, where Carl saw it, what, 2 years ago?
Last year.
Last year. Okay. It plays now everywhere. Why? I don't. Well, different audience, different critics, different film historians, and a new zeitgeist than when it came out. You know, I don't compare myself to Vincent van Gogh, for example, but you may. You can compare me to Vincent van Gogh if you want. No, I'm sure you don't want to, but here was Vincent van Gogh, one of the world's greatest painters. You can't buy a Van Gogh for less than $10 million, and many have sold for over $100 million. And in his lifetime, he couldn't sell a painting. Why? I'm going to try and tell the audience a joke and see if it's funny to you. It's hard to tell a joke for an American to tell a joke to Czech people, but I'm going to tell you this joke and see if it comes across. There used to be in America a comedian named Johnny Carson. Do you ever hear of Johnny Carson? And one day, I turned on the TV at night, and here was Johnny Carson. And he said, a painting sold at auction today for $80 million. Of course, it was a Vincent van Gogh. He said, but what most people don't know is that when Van Gogh made this painting, he was in a mental institution. He was in an insane asylum. And the reason he was in an insane asylum is because he would say, one day I'm going to sell a painting. It works. You see? You get the I didn't have to finish it. Thank you. That's great. I'm so pleased. But you know what I mean? It's true. In his day, nobody wanted to buy a Van Gogh, and he was crazy because of that. And now look. So now my film that I made 37 years ago is popular again. And when, in its day, I was in an insane asylum. Yes. Yes, sir.
Nick Holdsworth from The Hollywood Reporter.
Hi, Nick.
Hi. I wanted to pick up actually on that point about the Sorcerer. That's been re-released on DVD and Blu-ray. Is it next month, or is it already out?
The DVD is next month.
Right.
They weren't going to release a DVD. The Blu-ray came out
That's already done, yeah.
several months ago. It took me months to make it. And it's still out and around. It's still being sold and rented.
But you weren't happy with the DVD that was available?
The DVD was terrible. It was a piece of junk. And it was out there, and somebody in the distribution company at Warner Brothers, I don't know who, decided, because there were many requests from people to have a DVD. Warner's thought, oh, well, DVDs don't mean anything anymore. People want Blu-ray. So I took months to make a Blu-ray, and somebody put out the old, horrible, miserable DVD, which was a pan and scan. And they put the new label on it. They put a new image on it. And so I wrote on Amazon, when the Blu-ray was #1, I wrote, if you do not buy the DVD, it is a fake, it's a fraud, ask for your money back, and I will support that. I put that out on Amazon and elsewhere on the social network, and people got their money back. And so then we decided we better make a DVD, so I went back in and made a DVD, which will be out next month, with a sticker on the cover that says, remastered by William Friedkin. And I have warned the people on the social network that this will be available for them. I went back and did the color timing all over again for DVD. And that's not usually the way it happens, Nick, as you know. Yep. Usually the DVD comes out, then a Blu-ray. But there was a mistake at Warner's, and someone did that. And now, hopefully, the one I've made, which will be available in August, will replace it. Certainly, I don't know. There's no guarantee that a picture will ever come back once it's released. Even some of the most famous films ever made cannot attract an audience again today. For some reason, Sorcerer has come back to this new generation. Everybody in this room is younger than me. I could kill myself. I would actually kill myself right here because I'm so old, and you are all so young. It's embarrassing. But welcome to life. Life is great. No, but I don't know why, Nick. There's no digital effects in Sorcerer. No computer-generated imagery.
But that's what's great about it.
Well, people seem to like that. Not all people, but a great many people seem to like the films of the 1970s. For me, the golden era in Hollywood was the 1940s and the 1950s. You know, like the American musical. There has been no better films made than American musicals with Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire. These are great films that belong only to that American culture. It's dead now because those movies were based on what was the popular music of America at that time. And that music is no longer popular. Those composers are dead. Obviously they're not writing. And there's new music, which does not lend itself as well to a musical film. But that's, to me, the golden period of the American film. Singing in the Rain, An American in Paris, The Bandwagon, Gigi. This was a great art form that's now gone.
Do you think audiences in the 70s had a problem with a movie that starts off in foreign languages and was subtitled?
I don't know. I mean, you're talking about Sorcerer. It certainly was not expected then, but they had no problem with my film, The Exorcist, just before, which opens in Iraq. It opened in Mosul, Iraq, and all of the language in that scene was Arabic. And people they had subtitles, and they were able to read them, and it didn't bother them. And the opening scene of The French Connection was shot in Marseille, all subtitled, nothing in English. By 1977, subtitles belonged to foreign films. this must be a foreign movie, you know. Somebody described the later period in America as the dumbing down of the culture. I don't know whether that's true or not. I think it probably is. You know, some cultures start at the very top, like the German culture, you know, which produced Goethe and Schiller, and then Thomas Mann, and, you know, so many of the great classic works of literature. And now who? I don't know. I don't know. But nobody can write like Goethe or Schiller today. And at one time, there was a man who lived in this country and died in total obscurity, completely unknown to his own people, Franz Kafka, whose works are beloved to me. I love his works. I will confess something to you. May I confess something to you? I've been to Prague a number of times. The first place I go to is Golden Lane to see this little souvenir shop, number 22, a little house that's painted blue, and they just sell souvenirs, postcards, and T-shirts, and various books about Kafka, and I go there because Kafka may have breathed that same air, and that's how important he is in my life, the literature of Kafka. Is there anyone writing like this today? The last I recall was Milan Kundera, but to his own people, Kafka died in obscurity. No one knew. He didn't want his works to survive. He asked the executor of his will to burn all of his works. And thank God he didn't. Max Brod, or we would not have Kafka today. Do any of you read Kafka still? Can you? A few. Have you read Kafka? Great, isn't it? Who in the hell is writing like this today? I ask you. Yes.
Hello, Mr. Friedkin. My name is Daniel, right here.
Hi, Daniel.
Hello. I'm just curious about your relationship with actors and your process in creating character in a film, and how you go about that to get the best result, and what your kind of advice is to actors in that kind of relationship on a creative process like that.
It differs with each actor and the age of the actor. Like the little girl in The Exorcist was 12 years old. So I became like a father to her, a surrogate father. With Gene Hackman, I also became like a father, but I became like the father that he hated. Because Gene, father, when Gene was young, his father had deserted the family. And I knew that he hated his father. So in order to produce anger in him, the anger that was necessary for the character, I became like a harsh father. And so the point of that story is that with every actor, the director works like a psychologist. I've never been in psychiatry. Am I keeping you up? Are you okay?
Yes.
Okay. Am I talking too much?
Yes.
No? Okay. See, I knew she didn't know what I was saying. But that's okay. But, see, I told you, Carl, we should have been translating. But in every case, a director becomes like a psychiatrist in that you try to find out the secrets of the actor, and then you use them. For example, with Linda Blair, I found out that the saddest moment of her life was the death of her grandfather. And so I would use that and remind her of that before she had to do a scene where she was sad. Or I'd use something else. And that's a process called sense memory. where you use the sense memories of an actor to reproduce an emotion that they felt long ago in childhood. There are things in everyone's life here that if you think about them, even you, if you think about them, they will make you angry or sad or happy. And it's the director's work to find those memories and suggest them to the actor to recreate them. That's how I work. I don't say to an actor, do it like this, or do it like that, or do it as I tell you. Because it's always the actor. It's that actor's face up there, their bodies. It's not the director. The director and the actor have to be on the same page, Nick. You know that. And to get on the same page, they have to understand each other. And in order for me to get the best work out of an actor, I have to find their sense memory, because all roles are based on emotion. The reason people go to the cinema is for emotion. They go to the cinema to laugh or to cry or to be frightened. People actually go into a theater to see a film that will frighten them. They go to see the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Why? If somebody told you, for example, that down the street there was a guy with a leather mask over his face and he was chopping people up and killing them and hanging them on meat hooks, you wouldn't go. You'd say, I don't want to see that. I want to arrest that man. Or get the police. But then they say there's a movie about a guy doing that. Oh, great, let's go see. Or yes, of course. Yes, you. Who else but you? Here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Iris Alesi, Albanian filmmaker. I have a film here in competition, and it's amazing that while we were shooting, our editor, Walter Fasano, actually brought cruising to us. And he brought it because of one specific reason. Like you said earlier, sometimes the films are also made on the third phase in the editing. And there is something very special you did to Al Pacino on that film. Can you please elaborate on that? When did you come up with that idea that you wanted to switch and turn into the ambiguity of who was actually committing the murders?
That's a wonderful question. What is your name?
Iris.
What?
Iris.
I-R-I-S.
Correct.
Thank you. What is your film?
Bota. It means world in Albanian.
Great. Has it shown yet?
Sadly, you missed it, but I will send you a link.
I'd be happy to see. it. I'm always interested in new film. And you seem like a very intelligent person, and I mean that. I discovered that in the editing room. Because the film Cruising was about an actual series of murders in the S&M world. And the guy who had committed these murders was a guy who is in the movie The Exorcist. There's a scene in The Exorcist where the little girl is in a hospital and she's getting an arteriogram. She's getting a procedure where they inject a substance into the carotid artery of the neck, and this substance goes into the brain and outlines the arteries in the brain to see if there's brain damage. And I filmed that at New York University Hospital with an actual doctor and his assistant. And his assistant, who is in the film, who helps Linda Blair onto the... His name is Paul Bateson. And about, 4 or 5 years after Cruising came out, I opened the front page of a newspaper in New York, and there is Paul Bateson's picture, and he is wanted for 5 murders. And he had picked up these young men in the S&M clubs. Why is she smiling? She's smiling because I'm telling you the truth. He had picked up these young men, taken them home, murdered them, cut their body into pieces, and he put them in plastic bags and threw them in the East River in New York. And the bags in little small writing said, "Property of New York University Medical Center Neuropsychiatric Division." And that's how they found him. And I went to visit him in jail. I called his lawyer, whose name was in the paper, and he arranged, I went through 7 layers of bureaucracy, and I got to see this man in prison, Paul Bateson. And he told me about these murders. And he told me that the police had offered him a deal. And if he would confess to more than those murders, they would reduce his sentence, because they wanted the headlines that all of these unsolved murders were now solved. And I said, "What are you going to do?" And he said, "I don't know, I'm thinking about it." Anyway, he got out of prison about 10 years ago. He is somewhere. I don't know if his name is still Paul Bateson, but Cruising came out of those stories of Paul Bateson. And many of the murders that he confessed to were in fact not solved. He confessed to them, and by saying, "I murdered 8 people or 12 people," or however many they wanted him to confess to, the murders remained unsolved. And it occurred to me in the editing room only that the murders in Cruising, my film, should be unsolved, because this stuff was going on. And what was happening was the beginning of AIDS. It was a time when AIDS had no name, but the deaths were occurring. There were these mysterious deaths in the gay community, and very soon, a year, it acquired the name AIDS. And it was a great tragedy in American life that happened to not only gay people, but straight people as well. And so my story, which was not about gay life, it was about S&M life, which is quite different. What?
Even more difficult the way you went.
Yes. Many gay people had never known those clubs or seen those clubs. But there were most of the people who were involved in Cruising are dead. But I based the story on that man who's now around. I don't know, perhaps he lives in Praha. She says no, but we don't know. Yes, sir.
There's a question in the back.
Oh, okay.
Aležucký, my question is, you practiced filmmaking in television. Many filmmakers practice it also in making commercials. Was it also your case? Have you experienced? Not at all?
No. I made one commercial once for Blaupunkt Radio. Is that funny?
Well, it's German.
Yeah. Yes, German, yeah. Is Germany funny? Not.
Ask the German. He's German.
Okay, not too. But anyway, I did not practice cinema in television. I went into television to be a television director. And after many years and many hundreds, if not thousands, of live television programs. I then made a film, a documentary, and it was made to save a man's life. I knew nothing about filmmaking. The only thing I learned from television was that the media were collaborative. You had to work with others. You had to get along with other people and communicate your ideas to other people. That's all I learned from television then. The techniques were totally different, the kind of programs I did. But I learned about cinema from making a documentary about a young African-American man who was on death row, who was going to go to the electric chair in 6 or 9 months. I had never made a film. It's in my book. I tell this and other stories. And I made this film with one other guy who was a live television cameraman who had never made a film. His name is Bill Butler. And he later became the director of photography on Jaws and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and The Thornbirds and many other films. I brought him out to Hollywood because our film not only saved this man's life, but it got me all these offers to go to Hollywood. It won film festivals. And that film, which is very crude, it was made in 16 millimeter, has been restored, and it's re-released on DVD and Blu-ray in a beautiful print, which I didn't do the restoration. Have you seen it?
People versus Paul Crump.
The People versus Paul Crump. That was the guy's name. And I simply did not believe in the death penalty. I did not want this young person to go to the electric chair. And as part of my work on the film, I was able to film on death row, and I watched a man die in the electric chair. I watched the state put a man to death. I watched my country, my state, my city decree that a man should be put to death. And I didn't want this fellow to be put to death, but his cellmate did die in the chair, and I was a witness to his death. And I remember every second of it as though it was yesterday. I live with this image every day of my life. So you say to me, why are my films so dark? Perhaps that's one reason. If you have ever seen someone die in the electric chair, it will change your life. I was basically a happy-go-lucky young man until then.
If I may come back to these commercials, I googled you slightly and I found that as an assistant in television, you have prepared some shot with cans of beans, and you have done
what?
it with cans. Can.
No, I think I know what you're referring to. Not a short, no. There's an incident involving cans. I think what he's referring to is the first and only lesson I've ever had in composition. I was an assistant director, and the assistant director in live television is on the floor in the studio where the production is being made, and the director is upstairs in a booth, and he talks to the assistant over earphones. And we were doing a live commercial where he was the director, I was the assistant, and there were 2 bottles of I think it was beer. And he said, all right, kid, make a picture out of those 2 bottles. Make a picture out of it. And I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. Make a picture. So I took the 2 bottles and I just set them up on a little platform. And he said, no, he's yelling at me. I told you to make a picture out of it, you idiot. And I looked up to the control room like that, and he came down to the floor, which was bad. When the director had to leave the control room, this was bad. And so he came over to where I had set up the two bottles like this, and he simply went like this. And that was my first and only lesson in composition.
Beautiful.
It's true.
Thank you so much. Let me wrap this up with...
Well, are there any other questions? If someone has another, I'll answer.
Sure. Sorry
Carl.
Oh, that's Thomas.
Thomas? Thomas, make it a good question.
Thomas is a co-director of the
I'm
film
the co-director
Iris.
of the film Bota,
Sure.
the Albanian film.
You guys going to send it to me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm not only an enormous fan of your...
Lachka can give you my email.
Perfect. We'll take it.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, Thomas.
Enormous fan not only of your work, but of your book, which is brilliant. I love your book. Thank you.
100 crowns goes back to
And I want to thank the festival for showing Sorcerer, which is such a lost masterpiece of American
Me
cinema.
too. I'm so grateful.
It was great
Thank
to see
you.
it on the big screen, because in Albania we can't see it on the big screen there.
You live in Albania?
We live in Albania. But I want to ask you about a work that I think is as brilliant as anything you've ever done, which is mentioned only a little bit in the book, which is this fantastic episode of The Twilight Zone that you did in 1985, Nightcrawlers, which is this ferociously vital piece of television, which is interesting you're talking about television. Can you talk a little bit about the process of making Nightcrawlers? And are you ever thinking of going back to do television now in this age of TV?
Oh, absolutely. I would rather work in long-form television in America than for cinema. Because I don't want to make a movie about a guy in spandex who's flying around the world with a cape and a mask, and he's knocking out all these criminals. I don't want to do that. So Nightcrawlers was a television movie for Twilight Zone when it was returned to television after its creator, Rod Serling, had died. There was a new series, and the producer sent me this script of Nightcrawlers. And he said, I know you would never be interested in working for television again, but this is a script I think would be right for you, and it was. It was about a Vietnam veteran who comes into a cafe on a rainy night, like in Karlovy, where it rains all the time, except now. But it will. And it was, this soldier comes in for a cup of coffee out of the rain, and he tells the owner of the cafe that he's being pursued and that people are coming to kill him. The people who were in his platoon in Vietnam. And that he is eventually going to be killed. And he warns the people of the cafe to get out because they will find him somewhere. And what happens is this platoon comes back, but they are ghosts. But they kill him. They shoot up the whole cafe and they kill him. And it was a rather terrifying episode because what it was really about was the ghosts of Vietnam that haunt the entire country of America. America is still haunted by Vietnam. And rightly so, I'm sorry to say. And that's what that Nightcrawlers was about. His platoon was called the Nightcrawlers. They were soldiers who moved at night. And you see them coming out of the forest to claim him because he survived. And what attracted me is the metaphor of the ghosts of Vietnam that haunt my country to this day. And hopefully, one hopes that this will never happen again, but then there was Iraq, and Afghanistan. What more can I
Peter.
say? Yes, Peter.
May I have a last question?
Sure.
I'm sorry because
No,
I came late. I came from a screening.
Why'd you come late?
Because I went to a
Didn't they
wonderful-
tell you it was 3 o'clock?
Yes, but I went to a wonderful Hungarian film which really overwhelmed me, and I couldn't get out. But
I'm sorry to hear that. but-
I'm sorry I missed so much of it. But there's one thing, whenever I think of French Connection, I think of the cold in the winter there. And I was wondering, for me, it kind of defined the mood of the film. And I was wondering why you choose to shoot it in winter.
Well, we had to. You know, that's when the studio said, okay, go make the film. Then they said it reluctantly. And if we had waited by the time I started shooting that film, Peter, the people who, get this Hungarian film out of your you can always see a Hungarian film here, right? Right? By the time the studio said, okay, make that film, all the guys who said go make it were fired. If I had waited another month, it would never have been made. So when we made it, it was the coldest winter on record in New York City. And it was literally freezing cold. And that's when we had to make it. If they had said, make it in the summer, I would have made it in the summer. However, there is a movie god. Really, you know this. Anyone who's made a film or loves a film or presents film, we all know that there is a movie god. And the movie god says, do you want to hear this? No. Thank you. Stands up while I'm talking. The movie god says, this picture will work, this picture will not. I never wanted Gene Hackman or Fernando Rey in that film. It was the movie god who, Gene Hackman was not even our 10th choice, but he was the last man standing. Let me tell you briefly a story that Fernando Rey, who was not my choice at all, we hired the wrong actor. It's in my book. I was looking for a man called Francisco Rabal, and my casting director cast Fernando Rey instead. They had the same initials. And Fernando Rey was not, Francisco Rabal was not available and spoke not a word of English. And so we were left with Fernando Rey. And he was great. And he told me the story of how he was discovered by Luis Buñuel, another master. Buñuel discovered Fernando Rey in the following way, proving that there is a movie god. Buñuel's producer on a film he was going to make said, listen, you should go and see this film. I forget the title. There's a great actor in this film that I think is right for a role in your film. And so, okay, Buñuel went to see the film. And when he came out, the producer said to him, did you like that actor? And he said, no, I didn't care for that actor at all. But the other guy, the fellow who plays the corpse, who is dead, he's dead in a casket. I like that actor. This was Fernando Rey. He didn't say a word in the film. He was a dead man laying in a casket. And Buñuel liked his face and hired him, proving that there's a movie god. I don't want to keep any of you from another Hungarian film.
Is there any other question? So let me wrap this up with quoting William Holden's character in Wild Bunch. saying, I wouldn't have it any other way. Would you?
No. Nah. I would have it no other way. Nah, other way. I've been very lucky. I'm very fortunate to have been able to work in this great and young, very young artistic medium, which is yet to reach its adulthood, even though there have been so many great masterpieces already made, there are more to come. I hope that Bota will be one of them. Really. I hope so. But there are many more masterpieces to come. This is the youngest art, cinema. It is the youngest art. Now there appear to be developing other art forms as computer-generated imagery and things like that. But cinema remains a young and still very promising and lively art. So all of you who write about it, who love it, who care for it, I want to thank all of you and those of you who make it for coming here today. It is my honor and pleasure to be here in this beautiful town and to enjoy your hospitality, especially that of Karl Och. Thank you, sir. Thank you, brother. Thank you very much. Thank you. God bless you. See you in a minute.